Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cartoon Crossroads Columbus 2023. I'm Jenny Robb, and I'm the head curator of comics and cartoon art at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, which is located just across the plaza in Sullivan Hall. We here at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum are very big fans of comics and graphic novels for kids. So I just want to say just a short thing to the parents that are out here. If you're wondering if reading graphic novels and comics is real reading, rest assured that it is, and it's helping your kids improve their reading and literacy, including their visual literacy skills. Okay, so clap one more time if you had the opportunity to visit our exhibit across the plaza facing Feelings, the Art of Raina Telgemeier. Fantastic. If you haven't seen it yet, it will be on display until November 19th. The museum is free and open 6 days a week, Tuesday through Sunday from 1 to 5. Now, I want to take a minute and thank the wonderful people who have made both the exhibit and this event possible. Thank you to our great friends at Scholastic and to Raina's agent, Judy Hansen, who have provided so much help and guidance, and I'm really excited to tell you that Scholastic is going to be publishing an exhibition catalog of the exhibit next year, so definitely look out for that. Thanks to our partners for this event, Cartoon Crossroads Columbus and the Wexner Center for the Arts. Please check out all the great CXC Kids programming going on at the Columbus Metropolitan Library downtown tomorrow and Sunday. And in addition, some great DreamWorks family films will be screened here at the Wex tomorrow as well. All of those films are free, but a ticket is required. You can get those online or at the box office. Thank you to the sponsors of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, including the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Ohio Arts Council, White Castle, the Columbus Foundation, UBS, and the Japan Foundation. A complete list of all of our sponsors is available on this card and in signage and all over the place. But thank you so much to our sponsors. This event is free because of them. I also want to just quickly mention all of the CXC partner organizations. This is really quite a unique model for bringing this Festival of Cartoon and Comics to Columbus, and it includes the Columbus Metropolitan Library, the Columbus Museum of Art, the Columbus College of Art and Design, the Laughing Ogre Comic Book Store, OSU's Popular Culture Studies program, and the Gateway Film Center. So thank you very much to all the partners. I'm getting there. If you want to purchase signed books by Raina, the Wex Bookstore has them available, I believe, in the lobby and also at their store. Raina will also be signing at the Columbus Metro Library tomorrow at 1 p.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Please note that if you have this CXC printed schedule, it does list the wrong time for Sunday's signing. It is not at 1:30, it is at 4 p.m. The website is correct. And note that she will only be able to sign one item per person in order to be able to get everything signed for everybody. So thank you for your understanding. Now, I'd like to thank and introduce the curator of the Facing Feelings exhibit, Anne Drozd. Anne has been the Billy Ireland Museum coordinator since 2019. Before that, she was a public librarian at the Ann Arbor District Library in that state up north. And she worked for the University of Michigan Museum of Art as well. She's also a cartoonist herself, and you should check out the awesome book she co-authored called Science Comics, Rockets from First Second Books. And we'll be hearing from Anne a bit later in the program. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce Raina Telgemeier. So let's see a show of hands. How many people here consider themselves a super fan of Raina's or drove a super fan of Raina's to this event? All right. So lots of super fans. I consider myself a super fan of her work. I've read all of her books. Like all great cartoonists, she's a master storyteller and a skilled artist. There's just something magical about the way she combines words and pictures to connect with readers of all ages. I don't have to tell you all that she's the creator of the best-selling books, including the Babysitter Club series, Smile, Drama, Sisters, Ghosts, Guts, and more. So please join me in a big round of applause to bring Raina to the stage.
Hi. Okay, now we have to do technical stuff. I guess I can just introduce myself by saying that I'm from San Francisco. I was born and raised there and grew up there before going to New York City to major in illustration and cartooning at the School of Visual Arts. And then I lived in New York City for about 16 years and was able to just kind of be around the comics industry, which was really helpful for me, and also the publishing industry. And when I first got into this career, I was a mini comics artist. I was a self-published cartoonist. I was putting stuff up on the web, and there was no such thing as the book industry is publishing graphic novels for children. Here we are. But somehow in the last 20 years, that has all come true. So it was like a dream that I didn't know existed that I got to help create, which was pretty cool. So I'm just going to show you kind of oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that means that the slideshow has to happen. Yeah, okay. Now we can't see the slides. Okay, hold on a sec. Sorry. Well, I can just do the talk without the visuals. Hey, okay, cool. I wanted to show you Linda Berry. That's important. This was the kid that I was. I was a big reader, and when I started reading comics in the newspaper at age 9, it was kind of like all of my favorite stuff came together and told me what I wanted to do with my life, which was to be a cartoonist. It came pretty naturally to me. I was always a kid that liked to draw pictures. Let's go, slides. There we go, cool. So that's from like age 4, maybe? I don't know what's going on. Like, why do the characters have pizzas for faces? Great question. And then I became somebody who was reading comics. Sorry, this is a little bit awkward because I don't know why it's taking so long for the slides to change. Come on, there we go. Okay, so on the left, that's like the first comic I ever made, and I didn't know I was making it. It was just this little journal assignment that my first grade teacher gave everybody, which was, here's your little journal. I'm gonna write you letters, you're gonna return letters to me. So she would say things like, what did you do this weekend? All we were supposed to do was write her a response, but I would often illustrate my responses. My weekend, I went to my grandma's house, and then I made a comic about it. There's the car, there's Grandma's apartment building, there we are in the elevator, and then there's Grandma on her big red chair. So I think my brain was just already thinking in terms of words and pictures to tell stories, and this was before I had even really become a comics reader. But once I did start reading comics in the newspaper, I started trying specifically to draw strips, and that's what you can see down below. I did not know what I was doing. I didn't have a class to take for anybody to tell me things like, draw the box first, and then draw the picture inside of the box to make sure that it fits. Or write the words in the word balloon first, and then put the word balloon around them so you know that that fits. And these are the kinds of things you learn by doing. But I mean, obviously, reading a lot of comics helped me as well. I'm just gonna have to touch everything a bunch of times. Touch screen works until it doesn't. Cool. This is a high school. I was part of my school newspaper and was often called upon to do comics like, which kind of prom date are you? And a lot of times it was just like in-jokes. And so that's why I've never really published the work that I did before I was in college, because so much of it was just very like insular and stuff that only my community would understand. And then I ended up, like I said, going to New York to go to art school, which was the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, or SVA for short. And because I was taking a bunch of comics classes there, oftentimes the assignment at the end of the semester would be to, okay, let's make mini comics. And so this is where I started making mini comics. Let's see what happens if I press that button. There we go. There's my mini comics that I started making in college, and I called the series Takeout because I liked food. And I think I did 7 issues of Takeout total. Each one was 12 pages long, just black and white short stories. And I became sort of like a mini comics distributor too, because this is what we did back in the 90s and early aughts. I would go to comic conventions, I would go to comic book stores, I had a little bit of a mail order service, and I managed to print and distribute about 6,000 copies of these guys, just within that sort of time period in my life. I had a day job, I was working for a book publisher doing like production and editorial work, and at that same time, I was also doing mini comics on the side. There's a picture. There it is. There's me at a table at a comic convention. One of the first comic conventions I ever did was Space in Columbus, which happens in the spring. I know. But like, I met so many good people at that event and got to do something with the Laughing Ogre. And so, I mean, I lived in New York, so it wasn't that far of a drive, and I just tried to like ping myself around as much as possible. And every one of those face connections was valuable to me, and all of the artists that I met. I mean, it's really cool being at something like CXC and like seeing friends that I've known for 20 years now in this industry. So when people ask like, what's your advice and like, what can you do if you want to be an artist now? It's like, start now. Don't wait. Start today and start small, and then just build your connections as much as you can. It has been nothing but wonderful. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the books that I've done and just kind of like, why do I focus on personal work? Why do I focus on memoir? And even if I'm writing fiction, why do the kids always live in such realistic worlds? And I think it's because I'm just interested in like the mundane and the in-between. Like not the adventure itself, but the car ride to get to the adventure. Like that's some good material right there. And who can't relate to being stuck in the car with a sibling or somebody that you'd probably rather not spend all of that time with? I was kind of a shy kid. I was a really like observant and introspective kid, but I didn't have a big voice at the time. So it's kind of like now I'm giving that character, that self, my voice. And then I started writing about my teeth. And when I first started writing a story about my dentistry experience, people were like, who would ever want to read that? Is that a book that you should, you know, who would care? And then Scholastic published Smile in 2010, and it turns out lots of kids are interested in reading a story about braces. What do you know? Again, I think all of this just comes down to being able to relate to what you see on the page, and if you think your life is too boring or your life is too, you know, uninteresting to write stories about it, that's not true. Everybody's story is interesting enough to write a comic book about or a novel about. There we go. This is kind of just what my work looks like before and what it looks like when it's done. All of my writing is thumbnails. I cannot write a script and not draw pictures at the same time. I can't really write a description of what's happening in a panel. I'm just like, let me just draw it. That explains it so much better. There's a silent panel in the middle, there's a silent panel on the bottom tier, and then there's a sound effect, bang. But the comic is the same from the thumbnail to the finished version. It's just that I've spent so much more time on the actual artwork. Smile, this is what that's from. That book took me a total of 5 years to create because I was putting it up online once per week as a webcomic, and then eventually it got published. But when kids read the book in 45 minutes, I'm like, oh man. Read it a second time maybe, because that'll make me feel like those 5 years that I was working on it were worth it. Okay. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I have an interesting relationship with my family. We get along pretty well, but when I was growing up, there was a lot of tension because both my sister and I were artists, and so it was always this kind of jockeying for position for who was better. I'm the older sister, so I'm supposed to be better. No, man. When my sister was about 2 and I was 7, she was so much more talented than me and just constantly upstaging me, and that was a source of much conflict for both of us. But because comics has always been just the way that I communicate stories, I never stopped doing it. I've been doing it now professionally for almost 20 years, and that's really hard to believe. And so something like a giant retrospective show at the Billie Ireland it's been a career highlight for me for sure. And it's given me a chance to go back to some of that earlier material that I did when I was a kid, that I did when I was in school, and try and see the through line from then to now. And I've had such a blast working on it with Anne, and I'm going to welcome her up here in just a minute to talk to us about that. Yeah, and like a whole host of great things that I have gotten to do in my career and achievements that I feel like I've experienced. This might be one of the coolest of them all. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to welcome Anne to the stage with me for a conversation. Anne? Do you want to keep that slide up, or do you want to put back on the rotating? I just want to do a quick little drawing for you guys, if that's okay. Because, yeah, that's fun, right? It's not too fancy back here. I've got my iPad and my Apple Pencil, and at the beginning of this year, if you had asked me, do you do anything digitally, I would have been like, okay. I would have said no, but a friend of mine sat me down and just showed me the basics of Procreate. The problem with this program is that everything is hidden, so it's not intuitive to learn it. But if somebody goes, oh no, you just tap with your two, fingers to go backwards, and now I can do everything I want to. So now the answer is yes. And so with this program, for the book that I'm working on right now that I can't tell you anything about at the moment, I've been doing all of my layout work in Procreate, and so that means I'm taking like a pencil tool, and I'm doing it like I used to do on paper, and that I'm sort of sketching out like the rough shapes of what I do with a blue thing. And yes, I'm just drawing my head. I know. So that would be like replicating blue pencil. And I used to do this with an actual blue pencil. I would do that onto my boards based on my thumbnails. Then I would take a graphite pencil and draw over that. Then I would take my inking tool, my brush, and I would ink over that. And so it was basically writing and drawing the comic 4 times over. Thumbnails, layouts, pencils, and then inks. The nice thing about the computer is like I can just do this in blue and then I can print it out, and then I'm just going on top of that. So I've saved myself about a half step in the process, but I've gotten a lot faster at using this program. So I've got a book that's 262 pages long, and I have 20 pages left to draw. I'll be done drawing it in the middle of October, and it doesn't come out until 2025, but I know, I'm sorry. But just to give you an example of like what I mean when I say I'm inking over my pencil lines, let me switch my tools, and I will just ink over this little drawing right here. I mean, technology has gotten pretty good for cartoonists. A lot of us also use Clip Studio these days, and some people just work from start to finish in Clip. And I've tried to learn how to use Clip a couple of times. It's even more sophisticated and hard to figure out than Procreate is, but I think once you get going with it and you realize it's specifically made for cartoonists, like that's a pretty cool feeling. It used to be called Manga Studio, so some of us were a little alienated by that. Like, what if you're not a mangaka? Can you use this program? Yes, of course. But then they rebranded it, and now they call it Clip Studio. I actually don't know why that is. What does Clip mean? Is Clip a cartoonist term that I don't know about? Yeah, so I've always focused on characters and their emotions and their faces. It's always been the most interesting part of this job for me, and I spend a lot of time observing people and how they move and how their body language is and what their facial expressions are like. And I used to just like drawing happy characters like this, and then I realized the more like pain and torture I can put my characters through, the better, which is part of why I focus so much on like the uncomfortable times of childhood. That's like my oeuvre. I love that. Like, if Raina's unhappy, like the cartoonist Raina is having a really good time. I admit it. Okay, so let's just say inks. Okay, thanks Columbus. Or let's say thanks CXC, because that is why we are all here this weekend. Okay, sweet. And now there's no ink on my fingers, which is even better. All right, now I'm going to join Anne for our talk. So thank you. Phone's on. There we are.
All right. Now can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us this evening, and I'm so pleased to be here with all of you and with Raina to talk more about the why and how of your work and the exhibition as well a little bit. For those of you who joined us at the event in June, I do want you to know that this is going to be a totally different conversation. And we talked a lot about how the exhibition came together at that event. And here I want to talk with you more about how you capture mood and memory and events in your life and make them universally relatable to all of us in your wonderful books. So, first thing I want to ask you a little bit about is about collecting. So you were just talking about how you observe people, but one of my favorite authors, Ray Bradbury, he wrote a book called Zen in the Art of Writing. And he talks a little bit about feeding the muse. So I'm going to read a very brief quote from Ray Bradbury and then ask you the question. So, in a lifetime, we stuff ourselves with sounds, sights, smells, tastes, and textures of people, animals, landscapes, events, large and small. We stuff ourselves with these impressions and experiences, and our reactions to them. Into our subconscious go not only factual data, but reactive data, our movement toward or away from the sensed events. These are the stuffs, the foods on which the muse grows. This is the storehouse, the file to which we must return every waking hour to check reality against memory. So, Raina, with that in mind, what do you collect for the purpose of storytelling, and how do you capture it?
There's a lot of screenshots of Google Maps and Google Street View. And that started because I was living in New York and was really nostalgic for California. So I started wanting to set my stories not just in my hometown, but really specific streets, specific places, a lot of places that don't really exist anymore. So I was down all these rabbit holes of old Flickr accounts and old, street views of places that I wanted to draw. And sometimes you're just I wish I could just steer my fake car into that driveway to get a better view of this building, but I just have to do the best with what I can. So I collect a lot of that. I collect a lot of interior shots too. I spend a lot of time on Instagram just looking at apartment and home websites and stuff, just because I'm not naturally skilled at environments, I don't think. It's something I've tried really, really hard to get better at over the course of my book career. I used to just want to draw characters floating in space, right? Just on the page, drew a lot of Little Mermaids when I was in school, so I would draw the Little Mermaid, and then I was oh, she's just there. I guess she's in the middle of the ocean, but what about some plant life, and what about a sandcastle or whatever? So it's kind of the same thing where I'm looking for a lot of reference.
So you're doing a lot of digital searching and capturing old photos.
Yeah, but I also have to build myself blueprints for every environment that I draw. So I do have drawings where this is a classroom, this is where so-and-so's desk is, there's a bookshelf behind them, because when you draw comics and you're doing 260 pages of kids in different spaces, you forget. It's really easy to forget what you've already drawn and how you've drawn it. So if you don't want to do as much correcting later down the line. And I'm not great at physical building, so I've always wanted to do the thing that some people do, which is to build a space, a model of a place. And a lot of people will do this digitally in SketchUp or one of those programs. I'm still pretty analog, so I'm still just drawing a little sketch and then realizing, oh, I need to add another piece of paper to extend the sketch so that it's big enough. But
So you're making diagrams and things that you're referring back to.
Yeah.
And that's making me think of a lot of the things we have at the Billie Ireland by other artists, especially some of the Disney things where they've got Pinocchio's, an overhead shot and mapping out everything in the boat, and a very beautiful drawing of the lock from Snow White that shows how the mechanism works, so everybody gets it right. So you're doing that for yourself in your work.
I'm an animation team of one.
Do you carry a sketchbook?
Do I carry a sketchbook? Sometimes.
Did you used to, when you were younger, carry one with you everywhere?
Yeah, I did. And now I admit that I just carry my phone around and just type notes into the Notes app on my phone, because, I don't know, drawing is actually starting to feel like the secondary part of the art or the work that I do. It's the writing, the characters, trying to express an emotion through comics. That's happening kind of at the thumbnail stage, where I'm just, like you saw on screen a few minutes ago, it's just floating heads and word balloons. That's the hardest and most interesting part of the process. So by the time I get to art, I'm it's fine, I'll figure it out as I go.
You've also been capturing things your entire life, and we were talking to you earlier, you mentioned that you are able to now, since you've been practicing so much with observing people, that you're observing all the time and just kind of writing it to your brain and capturing that too. So that's, I think, a skill that you've built over the years. So maybe your brain is now your sketchbook too.
Yeah,
so,
I like that.
So is there anything else that you collect that inspires you, like any other collections, not necessarily related directly to your storytelling, but?
Yeah, I have all sorts of stuff. I guess I like things. And your house is like this too. Both of our houses are full of like fun things. I was a big fan of Smokey the Bear when I was a child because my parents gave me like a vintage Smokey that my grandmother had been saving for me for years before I was born. And then I got the bear, and it was like my thing that was always in my hands, and it's like threadbare, and its skin wore off, and my mom had to sew like a pair of pants on the bear so that its stuffing would stay in. And there's an author named Pan Munoz Ryan. She writes middle grade literature, and she also collects Smokey the Bear stuff. So she and I have been sending each other like Smokey stuff that we find for several years now. So I have like a really cute collection of Smokey the Bear stuff. I have a salt and pepper shaker where it's like two Smokies, I don't know why, but one of the Smokies was printed with its eyes like super off register, so the eyes are like down here. They look like that character from the Goonies. But like that's awesome. So I have some weird like reject Smokies in my house. I really like Japanese pottery, so like anytime I'm in a place that sells it, I want to buy like another porcelain thing that's been like hand painted. Oh, are we just going to talk about all my stuff? I love this.
I'm curious. Is there anything particular about the Japanese pottery? Is it that it's handmade? Is it all a particular form or color, or does it evoke something?
Yeah, I love like browns and blues.
Okay.
So almost everything I've collected is a version of that. And they're not displayed. They're not like precious items. It's like, ooh, cereal out of this beautiful bowl. Like cereal tastes better if it's out of a beautiful bowl.
Then living with all of those objects, do they inspire like what you're doing in your work sometimes? Like you might see something that will evoke a memory or a feeling that you then can capture into your work as well.
I would say that experience happens more when I listen to music. And have we talked yet about the music thing, or are we going to talk about that tonight, or
we have
can we
not
tell them?
talked about it yet.
Can I tell you guys what we're doing? Actually, you tell them because it's so cool.
So we have another event related to the exhibition that will be happening Monday, October 9th, which is a week from the upcoming Monday, at Weigel Hall with a partnership with the Symphonic Band at OSU. So they are responding to the exhibition, the feelings that we pulled out, the universal, 6 universal feelings, and there will be music that relates to that, but there's also going to be this amazing, Raina did a drawing exercise that is going to be a duet with some improv musicians. So a very awesome experience where it's a duet with Raina's artwork and the musicians responding directly to that. But then also, we pulled all of the color from one of the emotions from pages of Raina's books, and there will be another artist who created a piece that is in response to one of the pieces on the screen. So Raina got a chance to talk with the Symphonic Band students earlier today, and we were talking a lot about how the creative process of creating music and drawing comics, there are so many overlapping similarities between all of the languages that creative people use when talking about their work. So we were talking about how line, rhythm, color, form, I'm trying to think of other words that came up, but there's an equivalent in music often with what we are doing as cartoonists. And so if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that too.
It was really cool. Is anyone here today that was in that session earlier today? That's all right. Oh, hi. Okay. It was so much fun. I love young people and the kinds of questions that they ask. They're always like way more interesting and introspective than adults. No offense. Yeah, it was a joy. And the fact that they're going to be performing in about a week's time and using some of my art as a prompt for what they're drawing is really cool. I wish I could come to it, but that would be my 4th time in Ohio, and I have to come back next month for something different, so. But if you can go, that would be cool.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I do listen to music as sort of a trigger for memories for myself. And I'll sort of hold back sometimes. I'm like, oh, I really like those songs that were popular in 1992, but I'm going to be drawing a comic about 1992 soon, and I want to save them so that I can really like tap into my image sources in my head that music brings out.
And talking about the performance just made me jump ahead to another question I had for you about rhythm. Can you talk about the importance of pacing, rhythm, and panel layout and graphic storytelling, and what goes into making those decisions when you're sitting down to first get started with laying things out?
I joke that I'm not really great at like explaining how I do what I do. I'm mostly just going on vibes. So that's what tells me, like, make this panel bigger, make this one smaller, put a silent beat here. But this is also why I can't write without pictures. When I sit down to think about a story, I'm not typing a computer draft. I'm not just writing the story longhand. I'm doing full thumbnails. And so that means a lot of silent panels. And I think as much can be said in a silent panel or multiple panels that are sort of spread out over the course of a page or a chapter. Those can tell you just as much as words can sometimes. And especially if you're not a great reader, which a lot of kids are not that skilled as readers by the time they're available to be reading comics. And it's like a non-English speaker can read a comic and pretty much get it. And somebody who's not great at typing or spelling or reading can also read a graphic novel and understand what's going on. So I think for me, it's just the way my brain likes to put information down, and that includes writing a lot of silent space. And if I was just typing a screenplay-style draft, I would have to say, this is a silent panel. Raina's looking contemplative. But it's much faster for me to just scribble that down as fast as I can. Thankfully, my editors are good at looking at my scribbled drafts and knowing what's happening, but that's also part of our working together for almost 20 years.
And then to jump off of that rhythm, one thing that I've learned when we were putting the exhibit together was about Smile and how unique the rhythm and pacing is in that book. And I hadn't picked up on it until you mentioned it, and I went back and looked at it. So Smile was originally a webcomic that you were releasing once a week, every Wednesday.
Yep.
And I think I remember you mentioning that because you were looking at the Sunday comics, like for better or for worse, how everything is just, the story is happening in those panels on that page on that day, and there's a rhythm to it that has a period at the end. So you talk a little bit about how that pacing changes in Smile.
Yeah, so with Smile, which I worked on for 5 years, about 3 of those years were when I was on this schedule of posting 1 page per week on the website that it was on. And anytime I needed a break, if I was like on a deadline for something else, I would have one of my friends do a guest strip. So I have like 20 different strips about other people's orthodontic journeys that I ran as guest stuff, and hope I get to do something with that someday, because that was really fun. But yeah, it was 1 page per week. So each page needed some sort of satisfying beat at the end of it. So every page of Smile up until about page 120 is kind of a self-contained beat. After that was when I got my book contract and had to sit down and write the whole rest of the story in one go. So I didn't need to rely as much on each page sort of standing as its own satisfying little chunk. It's more like, oh, you have to actually read the full chapter to get what I'm doing here. But yeah, it reads to me more like a comic strip, just rhythmically, than the rest of my work has since then.
How did you approach that change? Were you thinking about that rhythm when you sat down to do the first chapter? Was it a really hard transition at first?
It was difficult, yeah. I was so good at that beat structure and then having to think about the full rest of the story. But again, I was already paired up with an editor, and she just wanted to see kind of an outline of what else was going to happen in the story. And it's a true story, so I knew what happened in the story. That wasn't hard. Yeah, it was a little bit of a growing pain, but not an uncomfortable one. And I've written every one of my books since then, where I sit down and write the entire draft as thumbnails, and then Cassandra will read that, and then we'll edit my thumbnails for a while, and then eventually we're all happy, and then I can start drawing for real.
All right, I want to talk about collaboration a little bit. So how do you collaborate with other artists or writers or colorists or editors, all of the people that go into making your work? when you're working on a project that involves multiple contributors? I'm also thinking you've done some work with anthologies where you were playing one role and you weren't doing both the writing and the drawing. So what's an ideal collaboration look like, and how do you maintain good communication throughout the project?
I haven't done too many big collaborative projects in my career, but the thing that I said I'm working on right now, that's 262 pages, that is a collaborative project. I am co-writing and co-drawing this book, and I think in this case I've been the one steering that ship. So everybody that I'm working with is, I don't want to say answering to me, that's wrong, but I'm basically like the project leader, so I'm always the one who's explaining things and talking about the collaboration and how that's going to work. It's been really fun. I'm so used to working by myself, and I feel like I'm pretty good at writing by myself, but I only have so much in me. I only have so many ideas and so many types of stories that I can execute without anybody else's feedback. So the collaborative thing that I'm doing right now, it's just like, oh my gosh, I can push myself in totally different directions. How fun. Most of the time. Sometimes those pages that I'm drawing are not very fun, but, and I mean, I was technically collaborating on the Babysitters Club project when I first began my career, because I was taking pre-existing novels and adapting those into comic book format. But I was given a lot of leeway with that project. If I needed to cut dialogue, I could. If I needed to rearrange parts of the story or like bring in a chapter from an entirely different volume of BSC, I could pull from elsewhere. It was up to me which of the projects was going to turn into those 4 graphic novels. So I used books 1, 3, 4, and 7, I think, of the series. And then people started asking, are you going to do the entire rest of the series? And I was like, that series is like 117 volumes long. Or
so much. It's been going for a while.
215. It's really big. So this is why now there are other artists who are working on the BSC graphic novels, and they're all great. So I love. It's like we have sort of a sisterhood of the traveling pants thing with the Babysitters Club now. The siblinghood. Sorry, we're not all females. Some of us are.
So you shared some of your favorite artists and influences from your early years in the exhibition, Facing Feelings. Are there any artists that you've come across recently that have inspired you, influenced you, or significantly changed your outlook on your work or life in general?
Yes.
Would you like to share?
There are several. I was looking, because we talked about the questions in advance, and I sort of like made a list and then was like, and this person, and this person, and this person. And it's weird because like some of them are like my friends and my peers, but it's such a small industry that I think we do a lot of like noticing and paying attention to each other's work. I think when I was first starting out, like Brian Lee O'Malley's work on Scott Pilgrim was the thing that just like grabbed me by the throat. And I went, whoa, comics can do all of this too? That's awesome. And yeah, so he's been a big influence to me and a lot of other artists within our generation, I think. I'm really loving Blind Alley these days by Adam D'Souza, which he's running on Instagram and on his Patreon. And it's just kind of like a comic per week or a couple comics per week, and it's just about this group of kids, and there's like some mystery that we're not sure about what's going on, and like why does that creature talk and why does it live underground? But I don't know, it's just kind of like a melancholy strip about kids, and it reminds me a lot of Peanuts in the way that it's drawn and the formatting, but it's like a Peanuts meets the game Myst from back when we played games on CD-ROM. And the person that took over the Babysitters Club for me, Gail Galligan, used to be my assistant. Like, we've known each other for a really long time, and they used to come over to my house and like help me scan pages. And then they went to art school, and like now they're the Babysitters Club after me, and then they just came out with a book called Freestyle last October, and it is so good. Gail is so good. And I'm like, oh, if you want a master class in like how to panel comics, read Gail's work, not mine. I'm just drawing squares on a page, but Gail is just like outrageously good. Yeah, there's lots. I get a lot of my comics on Instagram these days and Patreon, so I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I love to hear, because I know that you're always looking at other people's work, and you've got such a good eye for for what is happening right now in comics and sharing that and advocating for creators that people might not hear about otherwise. So I just wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to do that.
You guys know there's a new Tamaki Cousins graphic novel out, Roaming. I just finished it a couple of days ago. It's ridiculous. It is so good. My response when something is so good is like, I'm angry. Man, I'm so mad at Mariko and Jillian for doing such a good job. But it's not a kid's book, but it's a book about 19-year-olds just visiting New York City for the first time and how that feels. And I was 20 when I visited New York City for the first time, and it was just like, how did they know? How did they get inside of my head and see and feel all of the feelings that I felt on that trip? So, yeah, man, Jillian Tamaki, just one of the best cartoonists of our time.
And I think I have one more question for you before we open it up for the audience to ask some questions too. But I want to bring it back into the exhibit a little bit and talk about the characters' expressions in your book. So one of my favorite things about your work is the ease with which you seem to, and maybe it's not as simple as this for you, because I know a lot is happening within the brain of the artist, but it seems effortless, the way you're able to capture a facial expression and pare it down to just the minimum number of lines that we as the reader need to know exactly what you mean. And how did you develop that skill? Are you still actively developing it? Is it now just within you to do this?
It all comes back to studying and like reading and learning and exposing myself to as much new comics art as I can. I guess some of it's muscle memory, some of it is doing like realistic figure drawing in school and like learning how to depict the body and the face as realistically as possible.
Did you learn all of the muscles and draw all of that out too?
I was so into anatomy when I learned anatomy. I was like, oh my gosh, everything makes sense now. And it's like, learn the rules so that you can forget them. I feel like that's a pretty common like thing that people say, but that's what I did. And then continuing to read other cartoonists. And like, does anybody know the book Yotsuba? It's a Japanese manga about a little kid, and she's weird. Like, that's the whole premise of the book. But man, that guy is good at facial expressions. And like the page turn to where she just looks like she's having a normal day, and then you turn the page and she's just like raging at her dad because he asked her to like clean up her toys or something. It's so good. And I know that the language of manga is a little bit different than the language of American comics, but I like that they have started to kind of merge together, that we have a lot of young cartoonists now who are influenced by anime and manga that they had access to when they were teenagers. We were just a little too old to have that when we were teenagers,
Right.
But oh my gosh, it's cool to see that influence in other people's work too. So yeah, always trying to get better at it.
All right, so are we ready to open it up to the audience?
Are they going to be nice?
Questions?
Yeah.
So we have two folks we've got Jenny Robb and Dave Philippi, who have kindly volunteered to run the microphone. So do you have a question for Raina or for me, please feel free to raise your hand and someone will come around with the microphone.
Do you and Damara get along now?
So Amara's my sister. she's the co-star of the book Sisters. We actually, this is going to sound weird because I wrote a whole book about how we hate each other, but that's not really true. Like we've always had a lot in common, and because we shared a house and a family, it's like I know what pushes her buttons and I know what unpushes her buttons. So I was really good when I was a kid at like making her happy or like talking with her when she was upset about something. So we get along much better as adults though, because we don't live in the same state anymore. So I see her like once or twice a year. It's great.
Hi. So I've been reading your graphic novels for a really long time, just to like do the TLDR of it. Basically, Smile helped me a lot through like getting through the experience of getting braces, and drama was kind of like a guideline of both being in drama club and like figuring out my own identity, kind of. So I was wondering if there's any either graphic novels or just stories in general that you feel like figuring yourself out kind of helped you through that, or like gave you a guideline for like a period in your life.
Yeah, are you thinking more about like the formative years or just any time?
I guess like whatever you feel more inclined to, but I guess formative years I feel like would probably be cool.
Yeah, I think honestly like the biggest influence on my style and my work and the kinds of stories that I write is For Better or For Worse by Lynn Johnston. And she created that strip over the course of 30 years, and the characters all aged in real time in that strip, and I read it every day, so it felt like they were my next door neighbors. And I went from relating to the kids to eventually relating to the adults in the strip. And it's because I read and reread them all so many times. I'm like, it's like a joke, but I'll sometimes say, everything I need to know in life I learned from, for better or for worse. And I think over those 30 years, Lynn just tried everything and gave her characters so many different opportunities that it was like how to be a person, the comic strip. So that's probably like the biggest like inspiration for me as far as how to be brave in storytelling and how to approach things that no one's touched before. She had one of the first out characters in a comic strip in the mid-90s, their friend Lawrence, and then she killed the family dog a couple of years later, but he was a hero. Like, he jumped into the creek and like rescued April from drowning, so he died a hero. But like, has anyone ever killed a dog in a comic strip before? I don't think so. This is getting a little bit off topic, but but she did it all with humor. She did it all with like a punchline at the end of every strip, and so I think I'm in a similar vein where like I want to talk about real people and the experiences and the way that they feel, but I also want it to be humorous and enjoyable. So it's a very like fine needle to have to thread.
And you brought up Death of Farley just so you could do a call out to the Billie Ireland, right? Because we do have the letters and those strips there that were on display in the dog show.
Yes, I got to see those last summer, or was it
Yeah,
the
a
summer
lot of
before
fans
that?
wrote in about that, and you can see them in our reading room. So.
Yes, ask and you shall see. Farley dying. It's great. Not really. He's featured in lots of different comic strips.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So earlier you were talking about how when you're writing about when you were younger, you listen to the music that you used to listen to when you were younger. So I want to know when you're writing about things that you didn't go through. So like drama, Ghost, The Babysitter's Club. What kind of music and artists do you like to listen to when doing those?
It's a good question. I tend to write in silence. And then I tend to listen to just whatever's new and fun that Spotify throws my way when I'm penciling. And then when I'm inking, I can actually listen to like podcasts and audiobooks. If I were to try to listen to podcasts or audiobooks while I was drawing, like drawing is way too much thought, takes up way too much brain space. So it needs to just be like familiar, upbeat, happy sounding indie pop. I don't know, that seems to be what I go for. And because people ask sometimes, what I am listening to on my headphones and cassette in Sisters is Cooley High Harmony by Boyz II Men. That album came out just a couple of months before that story takes place, and it changed my life.
So when you wrote the book Ghosts, what inspired you to write it?
That was a lot of different things. I had been thinking of the environment and the characters that lived there for something like 8 years. I was collecting vibes, as they say. And then when it came down to writing this story, one of my young cousins developed a brain tumor, and she ended up passing away when she was 13. And just seeing like what her family went through over the course of just a couple of years of illness with their daughter was so moving and so profound. And it's not a story about that family specifically, but it's a story that's kind of inspired by the love that they had for each other. And again, like the place that it is set is a fictional town, but very much based on several of the towns that I lived near growing up in Northern California. So I think of that setting as a character as well. And most of my ideas come from some sort of big feeling in my memories, whether it's like pain or whether it's joy. Like you've got to get to that place. So I'm trying to remember like what the big emotion was with Ghosts. I think I was just trying to figure out what I believe about death. Pretty good kid stuff, right? Like that's. But that was a really interesting question to me at the time, and I was trying really hard to understand and figure it out. I still don't know the answer, but it was really fun drawing skeletons at a party. Hello.
If you would write another book series, what would it be about?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have an answer yet, but I grew up in like the school choir. I spent a lot of time in school choir, and in theater productions. And so I've already written a book about theater stuff, but I have this idea at some point that I want to write a book about choir kids. The problem is, books don't have any sound. So maybe I need to make that story in collaboration with musicians. I don't know if we know any musicians, but I don't know if that means that I'll ever get into like working in film instead of in comics, or if I want to just like do more collaborative work, but I don't know. I feel like I have time to figure that out. I want to draw kids doing fun things. That's what I always really just want to do.
Like, is your workspace like really messy?
It's actually not that messy. I'm pretty tidy. And now that I'm doing a lot more stuff on my iPad, there's like no mess at all, which means that I don't even need to be in my studio, and I'm just like on my couch curled up in horrible posture. But it feels really cozy, and like my cats in my fireplace are there, so I'm like, this is so fun. I love making comics. I think when I'm inking, I have a tendency to knock stuff over, so I've got a lot of like ink spills on my floor in my studio, and there's just like eraser shavings everywhere. But that's like a well-loved studio if it's messy. There he is.
Did you ever end up liking artichokes like your mom?
Yeah, I did. In fact, in Guts, that book starts off with me like thinking artichokes are vile for a reason that's in the book. That's gross. But eventually, by the end of that story, I started being more accepting of them. They're my mom's favorite food, so they were around me a lot, and I realized they do taste good, like on pizza and in salad and stuff. So yeah, I can eat an artichoke. I just don't like it the way she likes it, which is you steam it, you take it out of the steamer, you put a big pile of mayonnaise on your plate, and you just dip the leaves into the mayo. I know, depending on who you tell that to, they're either like, that's amazing, or like, no, no, no. I remember the second variety.
Who inspired you to do what you do?
Wow, a lot of people did. I mentioned that there was a comic strip called For Better or For Worse, and that had a huge influence on me, but so did Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. And when I started reading Linda Barry's comics when I was in middle school, and just everybody that I've sort of absorbed and engaged with since then has gone into what inspires me. But I've also had some really fantastic art teachers in my time. Both of my parents have been really supportive of what I want to do. And yeah, it's like my parents are my biggest fans, which is really cool. But I mean, I'm inspired being here, like being on stage and talking with all of you, and like working with the Billy. Like I said, it's been sort of a dream come true for me. So this inspires me. This inspires me to like keep going. Like, oh, 20 years, I made some stuff, but I could probably make more stuff in 20 more years. Yeah, I feed off of other people, honestly. Like the more I'm able to step away from my drawing desk, I think the better the work is at the drawing desk.
What book did you have the most fun on making?
Ooh, out of all the books I've made, probably Sisters was the most fun. That book just wrote itself. Like I sat down to write, and like a month later I had the entire thumbnail draft of that book ready to go. I like that we asked a question earlier about, do I get along with my sister now? The answer is yes, but our personalities are very different from each other, so it was kind of like an oil and water thing, and that's one of the most fun parts of writing characters, is finding characters that don't get along with them and seeing how they bounce off of each other. So that was really fun. It was fun to draw also, because I got to take my Google Maps on a road trip. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've collaborated with other artists. How do you meet other artists that you work with, especially out of an art school environment where you're surrounded by other artists?
Good question. I think for me, a lot of it was just going to small press comic conventions and like meeting other artists and talking about our work together. And now, I mean, I used to meet people on message boards, and now it's whatever version of that we have nowadays, like in the Patreon comments or whatever. I've collaborated with people that I've just known for a long time. Some of them are just friends, and they'll say, like for example, my friend Casey was collaborating with another artist on this book called You Died, and it was all these different people's death stories, not of themselves, but just like the concept of death. And spoiler, her death story about her father is that after he passed away and was cremated, they scattered his ashes in Disneyland, which is so illegal. Do not do that. But she told me the story and how they threw some of the remains into the water in Disneyland, like one of the rivers of America or something, and it makes this foam. I think anything that lands in that water is probably bad news, but apparently if it's a person, I don't know, it created an entire foam in the river. And she just told me this story over text, and I was like, I have to draw that story. That is so funny. So, so the anthology is called You Died. It was published by Iron Circus, and the story is called A Funeral in Foam. It was only 10 pages long. If you're going to collaborate on an actual full-length book with another person, maybe, sign some things that say that your friendship is still going to be intact at the end of the project.
When you wrote the book Guts, when you were a kid, did you actually have the fear of vomit?
Yes, I did. In fact, I still have that fear to this day. But I've done a lot of work on it. So I've gone to exposure therapy, and I've gone to different other types of therapists. And I think now, having written a book about it and being able to just talk with people when I'm out and about and on stage, I'm finding that there are so many other people that share that fear. It's not uncommon. And it seems scary to talk about it, but now I'm not scared of talking about it, so that's progress. And I actually just read that book again a couple of nights ago for the first time in about 4 years, and I was like, man, I was a mess when I was a kid, but we're all messes, and it's okay to talk about that. My fellow messes, I want to hear your story as well. So I like that it starts conversations, if nothing else.
I think we've got time for one more question.
All right.
How many books do you have?
Like in my house, or have I written?
That you've written.
Oh, okay. I did 4 Babysitter's Club graphic novels, and I've done 5 original graphic novels, meaning I did both the writing and the art. And I wrote an X-Men comic once that was drawn by somebody else. So I guess that's 10. And then later, not this year, but next summer, we're going to have the Facing Feelings exhibition catalog. And that wasn't the same as sitting down to write and draw a graphic novel, but it's stuff that you can only see right now next door.
And a lot of great stories that you included in that. So.
Yeah, I got to tell stories that go along with those things, and that was really awesome. So that'll be out next summer, and then my book after that, I believe it's January 2025.
I want to know how many books you have in your house.
Oh, probably thousands. I don't know. I've never counted. I have a lot of books. I have a lot of comics and graphic novels.
Yeah, well, working with you on this exhibit has reinforced in me the notion that though we all have different life experiences, we share so much that is similar, because every day I get to see people come in and interact with your work, and it moves them, it causes them to interact with the people they've come with and tell stories and share, and it's been delightful to have your work on display in our museum this summer. And everyone has a unique perspective, and as we're all sitting here, you all have a story to tell, and we're here for CXC. We have a lot of cartoonists in the audience, we have a lot of writers, a lot of people with a lot of creative energy, ready to make things and tell their stories. So just want to make sure that everyone feels energized and empowered to tell your story, because that story you told about that little story your friend mentioned about the Disneyland thing, it's just a little funny thing, but you can make it into so much more and share it with everyone else. So
we did win an Eisner for that story, for best short story. I know. It was awesome.
Congratulations. And I'd like to end with a quote, because this quote from Jim Henson kind of ties together a lot of the themes and messages in your work too. So please watch out for each other, love and forgive everybody. It's a good life, enjoy it. And then I'm going to add, please also tell your story, share your story. And there's a lot more CXC happening, so make sure that you check out the website, look at the programming. Raina will be at the Columbus Metropolitan Library for our program tomorrow and signing, and again on Sunday. And there are a lot of other fantastic kids programs, and just be sure you check out the program. We'd love to see you at more events. So thank you all for coming.